Excellent. So thank you very much, Emma, first of all, for inviting me to talk to you today. It's a really nice opportunity to talk to some volunteers that have been involved in coast care. For anybody who doesn't know me, probably there's quite a few, my name is Richard Willis. I'm a senior wildlife ranger. Prior to this job, I was one of the county ecologists working for the county council. Did that for 7 years. So I've recently swapped over around about a year ago to start as a senior wildlife ranger, setting up the Space for Shorebirds programme, which is the ranger service all to do with protecting the birds in the grasslands of the Northumberland coast. So I thought what we'd talk about today is just to give you a background of what Space for Shorebirds is about and why it's been necessary to get Space for Shorebirds set up. And I think that's quite an important aspect, talking about the background, so that you can understand sometimes some of the conservation decisions that we might make and understand which elements we're getting involved in and maybe which elements we don't get involved in, because there is a particular sort of background there. And I'll talk a bit about the work that we've been involved in so far. So as I say, we've been going a year, so there's a few things to mention there. And finally, just how you can get involved as volunteers and potentially give us a little bit of support as well if you'd like to do that. Should be great. So first question is sort of why was it necessary to set up Space for Shorebirds? So for the last few years, Northumberland County Council have been preparing its local plan, and that's the plan which determines where development happens within the county for the next sort of 15 years. So it's a really big, important plan that's been prepared. And it was identified within that during the lifetime of the plan, there'd be around about 12,000 houses potentially developed within the coastal zone. And as well as that will be a new tourism development as well. So of course, all of that development increases the amount of coastal recreation that happens. And of course, that potentially includes any sort of recreational impacts and disturbance impacts. So as part of the preparation of the local plan, Northumberland County Council is required by law to undertake what's called a habitat regulations assessment. And without getting sort of too technical, it's just to make sure that the internationally important sites aren't adversely affected by the local plan. And if it finds that there are potential adverse effects from the plan, then the plan needs to be changed to modify to reduce those impacts. So the ones that we looked at the coast, and there are other ones obviously away from the coast, were the Northumbria Coast SP in Ramsar, the Lindisfarne SP in Ramsar, the North Northumberland Dunes SAC. And an SP is Special Protection Area and SAC is Special Area of Conservation, and Ramsar is an international sort of wetland treaty for particularly about birds. And all of these are the absolute highest level of conservation designation, so they're really, really important sites. And what came out of that assessment is that without mitigation, there would be disturbance impacts from recreational activity upon non-breeding shorebirds in particular, but also a risk to nesting terns that we've got here, obviously at the Long Nanny and the NNR, and also the dune grasslands of the North Northumberland Dunes SAC, particularly to do with the spread of piri-piri burr. If you get more people, you get more spread of piri-piri burr. So just to drill down on one of those designated sites, so this is the non-breeding shorebirds of the Northumbria Coast SPA. So for those of you that don't know, on the left-hand side of that screen, that's a purple sandpiper, and on the right-hand side it's a turnstone. And those are the two non-breeding shorebirds of our coastline, which they're in internationally important numbers. They're both real sort of rocky shore specialists, so you can see them sort of fertile amongst seaweed and so forth. But they're absolutely brilliant birds. They really do live very, very close to the edge of the water. Since the SPA was designated in the year 2000, there's been a real decline in the population of both of those species. So as you can see from the slide, 29% in turnstone and 39% in purple sandpiper. So they're quite sort of stark declines. And there's a range of factors driving those, amongst of which is climate change. But what sort of scientific research has been shown more and more strongly over the last maybe 10 or 15 years is that repeated flushing, so repeated disturbance, can have a population consequence to birds. So if they're continuously using energy that they wouldn't be otherwise doing or they'd be otherwise feeding, that can have an actual population consequence to the species. And really, really important to our assessment was work that Newcastle University did that we cooperated closely with, which was a turnstone study. And what it showed was that the turnstone populations, the closer they were to offshore refuges like Coated Island and like the Farne Islands, the more robust the population is, and the further away from those areas, the less robust, so the more they were declining. So this shows that actually disturbance is already a driver for population declines, or at the very least, in a situation where the population's in decline anyway, then this is a factor which makes otherwise good wading habitat less suitable, so suboptimal habitat. So it's pushing birds away from areas which are disturbed, which sort of makes common sense as well. So we know we've got to mitigate within our local plan. It's really then just a matter of what sort of mitigation that we're going to provide. So taking a step back, the whole of the Northumberland coast is important for birds, and in fact that's borne out by the Northumberland Shore SSSI, which is, so Northumberland Shore SSSI is pretty much the entire coastline of the county. So it really shows just how important it is for shorebirds. So it's not just the two species I mentioned, but also redshank, golden plover, ring plover and sanderling, plus also eider duck. And just about this slide here, that's another group of turnstones. Sort of again, because they've been so close to the water's edge, big waves came and just sort of pushed them off a rock there. So as part of the assessment, it was also shown that the mitigation really had to be at the coast. So there's no good providing some sort of mitigation in terms of habitat further away from the coast, because a number of these bird species just don't go inland at all. So purple sandpiper and turnstone very, very seldom go inland at all. And because it's a sort of a coast-wide issue, it's very difficult for individual developers, housing developers, to be able to provide any sort of form of meaningful mitigation. So that really the County Council needs to get involved and create a strategic mitigation scheme that fits within the local plan. So that's sort of where Space for Shorebirds comes in and is necessary. So fortunately, we're not the first authority to have grappled with this really sort of difficult issue. There's been a handful of authorities gone through sort of similar issues, starting around about 10 years ago with Thames Basin heaths, and they created their project to protect lowland heath sites. So that's again from recreational impacts, but to heaths, it's things like sort of vandalism and fire lighting and littering and that sort of thing. On the more on the bird side, in the last sort of 5 years, Bird Aware Solent and Bird Aware Essex Coast and Birdwise came along, as well as Sunderland Coast Project. So those are more to protect non-breeding shorebird populations and also some wildfowl populations, particularly disturbance issues. So there's a clear model for Northumberland County Council to sort of follow, and what those are doing is they're setting up a ranger service where they're actually engaging people at the coast with the view to sort of changing behaviours by education and engagement. So just a little bit about sort of how Space for Shorebirds will be funded and how other strategic mitigation schemes are funded. So first of all, it's not taxpayer funded at all. All of the funding comes from housing and tourism accommodation. So anybody that builds a house within the coastal zone or creates tourism accommodation within the coastal zone would need to contribute in order to get their planning permission. And though there's been one or two sort of raised eyebrows initially, actually, I think in the long run, house builders have actually been really quite welcoming of it, because in terms of this issue, the issue of coastal disturbance, what the developers used to have to do was sort of do visitor surveys and used to do bird surveys, and some of it could really go on for years and years. Whereas this, in terms of this issue at least, it sort of takes away any sort of vagaries and provides certainty to them, whereby if they pay into this, then Northumberland County Council will do the mitigation by providing the ranger service. So that's sort of the background, and sort of and I sort of condensed that, but that was about sort of maybe 3 or 4 years worth of work to get to that point, and getting different authorities and getting opinions, and so that there was lots of sort of background work done. So our work so far, so as I say, we were set up around about a year ago, and at its core, Space for Shorebirds is really all about engagement and education, and people are absolutely key to that. And it's not just people who are, you know, interested in wildlife, and, you know, in a way specifically, it's people who are not interested in wildlife. It's those people who are using the coast and maybe not seeing the wildlife and not responding to the wildlife, and particular dog owners. And I'll come on to that a bit more later on in the talk. So at the moment we've got 2 rangers, and to sort of prevent us being spread too thinly, because our area of responsibility is from Seaton Sluice right the way up to Berwick, what we've done is we've created 6 focus areas. So these are areas that are really important for birds, but also they're important for people. So places that we're working on very closely at the moment are Boomer and Beadnell and Coquet Estuary, Stag Rock north of Bamborough Beach, and also New Bigham. So, you know, real sort of jewels in the crown of the coast, but also, you know, so heavily used by people. And primarily it's about this face-to-face engagement, trying to explain to people about the birds, you know, and just simply having those conversations about birds to people is something completely new for people. And telling what we call our shorebird stories, and I'll go through one of those a little bit later, and also sharing our guidance, which I'll show you in a moment. And sometimes, you know, we're getting involved in difficult conversations. So, you know, if there's disturbance in progress, you know, if a dog's, you know, running loose, you know, and causing mayhem on the beach, you know, getting involved with that person and talking to them about what they're doing and what the bird's doing and the impacts that are having. And a lot of those conversations, you know, can start difficult, but actually, you know, we've seldom got to a point where we've not sort of gone away with the sort of good, sort of positive feeling afterwards. So that's the face-to-face engagement, but as well as sort of complementary to that, social media, obviously, because we've got this sort of time of COVID, there's been times during lockdown where we've had to be a lot less sort of face-to-face, and social media really comes into its own during those periods. So we're active on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and so, you know, if you're not already following us, and I know actually some of you are, but if you do follow us and sort of give us your support that way, that would be appreciated. Also, we're getting involved in events, but again, these have been impacted by COVID. We hope from the summer onwards we're going to be able to run a proper events diary. So, you know, getting involved in guided walks and little dog clubs and, you know, birding for dog owners, this sort of thing. But online talks have been a good substitute, where we're, you know, able to talk to groups of people. And, you know, by the end of this winter, we'll have done about 4 of the online talks. So they've been really sort of a good outlet. Incidentally, we've got one going out to the Natural History Society, though I must admit a lot of the content is very similar for this talk to that talk. and also reaching traditional media, so newspapers, but we're increasingly pushing out to parish newsletters. We've got a good relationship at the moment with Long Houghton and Boomer parish newsletter, where we're getting a very regular slot in there, and we'll hope to do the same for up and down the coast for parish newsletters. So that'll be something to look forward to in the next sort of 12 months or so. We've got a really nice website, or at least I think it's really nice. Do have a look at that. We've got more of our Shorebird stories on there and more detail about what we're doing, as well as our monthly blog on there. So I mentioned Shorebird stories, and this is the purple sandpiper sort of in action here with a turnstone in the background. And this is a bit of footage that we took one lovely sort of sunny winter's morning at Stag Rock, just north of Bamborough there. But this is, typically where you see them, where they're sort of flirting amongst sort of racks of seaweed and pulling out the sandfly larva and that sort of thing. So we like to talk to people about. I've left you with a purple sandpiper's bum there. Try and stop in a different place. There, that's nice. So purple sandpiper are real sort of rocky shore specialists. They don't venture inland at all. And we describe them as being sort of really, really tough and yet vulnerable. They're tough because they've got to withstand all the wet and the wind, and they've got no shelter. They just put up with the conditions right on the coast. They don't move. But because of this, because they're so closely wedded to this really thin band of intertidal habitat, we also think of them as being really vulnerable. Because if they get disturbed from that sort of thin band of intertidal habitat, they've got nowhere else to go. And also sort of a compelling bit of information is that, I mentioned the regional statistics earlier on, but nationally purple sandpipers declined 50% in the last 25 years in the UK. And it's a species which has been affected by climate change, as I mentioned. So what's happening is our population is gradually moving north, and some of the birds that used to winter here are actually starting to winter more in southern parts of Scandinavia. So, providing quite a sort of visible aspect to how climate change is happening. I mentioned our guidance, so we've really tried to keep our guidance very, very simple. So just these sort of 4 steps, and really the 4 steps should be applicable right through the year. We've tried to make it so that they're robust enough and clear enough to just see us right through the year. And part 1 is just really looking out for wildlife, just getting that mentality of when you're going to the coast, you're going to a place of nature where nature is, and to really look out for wildlife, because I think as regular coast users at times, there's a little bit of a blinkering where they're not necessarily seeing the birds, or they're not necessarily seeing the other wildlife. So trying to step out of that mentality and really seeing the wildlife is so important. And then giving the birds space. So, around about 40 or 50 metres, research has shown that if you're giving the birds that sort of space, they're far less likely to fly off. And because they're not flying off, they're able to do what they'd be doing otherwise, which is feed or roost, so that they can build up their resources and then stay in good condition during the winter. Next, it's follow signage and requests by rangers. So these will be things like, we'll be highlighting where there's important feeding areas or potentially nesting areas to be particularly careful in. And there might be some areas where we actually ask people to put their dogs on leads if they're a particular problem in that area. And finally, the last bit of guidance is when crossing the dunes to keep to the main paths, and that's really with an eye on piri-piri burr and stopping the spread of piri-piri burr, so keeping it localised and not spreading it throughout the dunes. So that's our guidance there. So next is our sort of dog rangers, which I alluded to dogs before. They're a huge sort of aspect of this. So I think the important thing to stress is that Space for Shorebirds comes at this as dog lovers. I'm a dog owner, and I think I always will be a dog owner. Absolutely love being outside with my dog and sort of sharing the enjoyment that she gets from being outside. But there's no getting away from the fact that dogs off leads at the coast can cause a real problem to wildlife. In fact, 50% of bird disturbance involves a dog off lead, and that's shown by numerous scientific studies. And around about 65% of visitors to our coastline, when we've questioned for the survey work behind the local plan, 65% are actually coming to the coast to walk their dog. So reaching dog owners is really, really important. So as part of that, we're recruiting what we call dog rangers, and it's just really dog owners who are sort of making a bit of a stand and saying, I'm pledging that my dog isn't going to chase the birds and is going to give space to the birds when we're at the coast. And what we do in return is we showcase their dog on social media, and it's a little bit light-hearted, but there's some really good interaction between the owners of the dog rangers, so actively sort of posting and encouraging each other. It's been a really sort of positive aspect of Space for Shorebirds. I think if one part of Space for Shorebirds sort of I really want to work, it's the dog rangers, because it's that important. So if you want a dog, and you're not yet a dog ranger, your dog's not a dog ranger, please join us. Just message us after this little talk, and you can have your dog on our social media channels, and that would be nice. So the dog rangers is sort of the sort of nice positive side. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily all like that. We do differ from other authorities in that we do have some enforcement powers, which is underlined by a Public Spaces Protection Order. So in terms of how this works is, if we spot a dog which is causing significant disturbance to wildlife at the coast, we can ask the dog owner to put the dog on a lead, and if they do that's fine. That's not a problem. But if they don't, then that failure to comply is an offence, and whereby the owner would be potentially liable for fixed penalty notice. Now, this is a really sort of small part of what we do. I really envisage it to be very, very small, but I think it's important that we've got this deterrent. And I think particularly during the nesting season, if we get sort of maybe problem areas, that maybe having these powers, or even just the threat of these powers, could be quite useful. So we've talked about the engagement, and we've talked about the guidance and the dog ranger side of things. But fundamentally, we need to know, is it working? So we've got a really sort of robust monitoring program. We spend around about 20% of our time actually monitoring bird disturbance. So we're out at each of our focal areas each month, and we're doing disturbance monitoring, whereby we do a bird count, and then we take a recreation diary alongside a disturbance diary. So we'll look at all of the human activity that's happening within the focus area. We'll make a note of that.
Richard, sorry, can you just click your mute button? I was trying to mute another guest and I accidentally clicked on you. I apologise. I clicked the wrong. No. I've done the other person properly now. Sorry, Richard.
Oh no, when did that happen? Was that half an hour ago?
No, just 1 minute.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I'll maybe start at this. Should I start at this monitoring slide again, Emma?
Please, yeah. Okay,
right. Okay, so for those of you who can't lip read, I'll go through this slide again. So we've talked about the engagement that we've been involved in. We've talked about the guidance that we've got, and also the dog ranger work that we're doing. but fundamentally we need to know, is the monitoring, is that work working? Is it having the effect of controlling and reducing disturbance? So by that, we do is we undertake monitoring at each of our focus areas, and that's around about 20% of all the work that we do. So it's quite a lot of resources, but we think it's really important to be able to tell very early stages where we've got a problem, where we've got issues with particular activities, or where they're affecting particular bird species. So what we do during this monitoring is we take a bird count, and then we run a recreation diary alongside a disturbance diary, so that we can correlate any human activity to any consequences for the birds. So you might get a walker through who will disturb a certain number of birds, and we'll log that, and that all goes into a database. So we'll be able to get things out like bird disturbance by species, bird disturbance by activity, or the level of bird disturbance, say, by tidal condition. And we're even recording the breed of dog, which potentially causes the disturbance. I'm not aware that anybody else is doing that sort of level of detail. But what this is all to do with is it's sort of the ongoing monitoring, and it tells us where we need to direct our resources, as well as telling us are we succeeding in what we're doing, or do we need to change our approach. As well as doing that sort of more formal monitoring, we're involved in mapping the coastal fields, because of course I mentioned the species which are not species which move away from the coast at all, but if you contrast that with say curlew and golden plover and lapwing, for example, those are species which spend time directly on the shore, but then they'll go into some of the coastal fields and they'll use those. So by figuring out which of the coastal fields are important, you get more of a full understanding of the ecology of those species, but also are they getting disturbed on those coastal fields as well, and which are the fields where actually could we do some enhancement on those in the future, because we've got something called net gain coming up in biodiversity net gain, and that might be able to feed into some of the enhancement work on some of these coastal fields. So that's sort of an important little bit of work that we're involved in. Just going to change slide for me. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So a bit of exciting work, and a bit of work which got pulled at the last minute last year is breeding bird protection. So we're really excited to sort of start getting involved in this year. So first of all, we'll be monitoring up and down the coast, and I know Coast Care is involved in getting some of this work together. We're monitoring the coast for suitable ringed plover habitat and suitable little tern habitat, and looking for areas where maybe those species are displaying or showing courtship behaviour. Because the problem with these species at the moment, particularly little tern, is that we've got all of our eggs in too few baskets, so we've only got 2 nesting sites at the moment. So the long nanny and the NNR on Lindisfarne. So really the objective is to create additional nesting sites to make that population far more robust to any changes which might happen at the coast. So what we're doing is we're creating fenced areas and areas where we think look like good little tern habitat. For example, there might be sort of flat areas just in front of the dunes which look like they're above around about 5 meters or so they can be away from those very high spring tides that we get. And the idea really is to exclude dogs and exclude people from those areas. We'll be appealing for volunteers to get involved in that work, and I'll come to that a little bit later. But as well as sort of the planned fencing areas, what we're also doing is we're getting some resources so that we can do sort of rapid deployment fencing as well. So if suddenly we become aware of an area where a little tern's got a scrape, rather than just sort of letting nature take its course, being able to protect that nesting area at really sort of short notice. So we're getting some some fencing that we can deploy at really sort of short notice to protect those sort of nesting terns. So that's the breeding bird and sort of season coming up, and really sort of excited at that happening. So last but certainly not least, and in no way is this an afterthought. It's a really important part of what we're doing is getting involved in helping to protect the dune grasslands. So we've got nationally important dune grasslands from Drew Ridge Bay right up to Cockleburn there. Some fabulous botanical species there, which also support a range of invertebrates, from dark green fritillary to burnet moth, cinnabar moth, really, really lovely species. And, if you go up and down the coast, you can see there's a real difference between some of those dune grasslands where some of them are in good management and, they're really colourful during the spring and the summer. But some of them are really scrubbing over, and some of them obviously becoming really sort of affected by piri-piri burr. I'm sure you all know this plant, bloody cranesbill, and that's even present, right the way down the coast, down as far as Blythe South Beach, and that's Northumberland's county flower, so it's one that we should all know. One that maybe we don't all maybe know, but it's a really, really important plant. It's purple milkvetch, and it's important because it's a really good indicator species. It tells us where we're doing things right on the dunes. So where perhaps we've got the grazing right. So I know Coast Care is going to be involved in looking at some purple milkvetch surveys, and we'll be supporting that as well. So that would be something to get involved in. And finally, the boos and hisses can come out for the villain of the piece, and obviously a species you'll be all familiar with. We'll be getting involved as well as highlighting where piri-piri burr is. Actually, during sort of November and December, we were mapping it quite extensively during lockdown too. So we were going out on a regular basis, and that was inputting onto Coast Care's database as to where piri-piri was. Sort of just adding to that information database. And I think, unfortunately, piri-piri is, it's no longer just a localized problem that we can deal with in isolation. It really is, it's all over the county. And of course, the guidance that we provide there to people visiting the coast is really to stay on the main paths when crossing the dunes. And, we hope to enforce that a little bit more. Again, just to stop the spread, because it can just get attached to people and to dogs so easily. So we've talked about the birds, and we've talked about the dune grasslands and a bit about the breeding birds as well. So what we're looking to do in the future is, first of all, expand the engagement that we're doing to include events. So I mentioned some of those before, that things like guided walks, birding for dog owners will actually be going out to dog training classes as well. So this idea of where people take their dogs to a dog training class, becoming a responsible dog owner, I think should also involve being responsible when it comes to wildlife, and trying to get that message out to dog trainers, for example, will be a really good place to start. We'd be really interested to see what our data tells us. So we'll be doing lots of analysis on our data that we provide at the end of this sort of wintering season, and telling us where we need to apply resources, and we're getting a master's student involved in looking at our data and sort of trying to analyse it as well. If there is potential for dog-free or dog-on-lead zones in future, there certainly has been talk about that. If that is something that's going to be done, well, that would need a really strong evidence base behind it. So the information that we're gathering will either support that or potentially say, well, that's not necessary. So that's something which could potentially develop. And I mentioned the fact that piri-piri burr is getting much more of a regional problem. What we need to do is to set up a piri-piri burr working group, because we're getting this issue where lots of different landowners are working on it in different times, and being a land manager, working with that particular problem in isolation is difficult. But I think if we all start to work together to track where piri piri is and track the efforts that we're all making together, then I think it'll be more successful in actually combating and reducing piri piri burr. So finally, it's just a few words about how you can potentially get involved with Space for Shorebirds. I think fundamentally for people who are coast care volunteers, the important thing is keep volunteering through coast care, because Space for Shorebirds and coast care are going to be working very, very closely on sort of shared aims, particularly in relation to things like doing nest searching for ring plovers and little tern, getting involved in nest protection, also shorebird counts and piri piri surveys and removal. So what will happen is we'll go to coast care, we'll ask, we need some work doing on this, and we'll register a task, and we'll be the people that meet you out on the coast to explain to you the work that we'll be involved in. So that's really the way to go about it in terms of volunteering with Space for Shorebirds. Just keep going through coast care, because the coast care are doing a great job. And finally, just thank you for listening. And if you want to contact us, I'd love to hear from you. So there's our contact details, but certainly if you just Google Space for Shorebirds, and if you have any questions, that would be a good time. Thank you.
Has anyone got any questions I'd like to ask? You can shout up or use the chat.
I've got a question.
Okay, is that Mandy?
Go ahead.
Hi, Richard. I was just going to, well, one of my questions was how we could get involved on a daily basis, really. I live near Rumbling Cairn at Howick, and we had a lot of, well, we had 3 oyster catcher nests on the rocks up above the bathing house last year, and 2 of them had 2 chicks and 1 had 1 live chicks. And unfortunately, they were all lost due to disturbance. All the chicks were lost.
Yeah.
And I wondered, I mean, it gets really, really busy down here during the summer. I just wondered what somebody like me who lives on the coast could do to try. I mean, are we okay to speak to people ourselves and try and advise them where the nests are, or what's the best thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, Mandy, first of all, I would say that unfortunately, sadly, last year was something which was repeated throughout the coast, where you had that really quiet period during lockdown where birds settled in areas that maybe actually they wouldn't settle in normal years, and then suddenly the taps were released, and there was this huge sort of tidal wave of people visiting the coast, and right in the middle of when breeding bird season was going ahead. I think in terms of what you can do as a resident, certainly talking to people is always worth it. We find that actually most people are very receptive to having a discussion. There's very rarely that people are not giving us the time of day to even get involved in a discussion. So that just opening up a conversation, I think, is always a good idea. But if you become aware of areas where you're getting a concentration of nesting shorebirds, then let us know, and we can help. Obviously we've got a certain number of resources, but we'd have, I've mentioned the rapid deployment fencing. we're also going to have little bits of signage as well that we can quickly come along and you know, pop in the ground to say, you know, nesting birds, be aware, you know. So let us know under those circumstances. And it is shorebirds that primarily we're concerned with. So, you know, that would be the sort of thing that we could help with. So get in touch with us, you know, as and when it happens, and certainly look out for it at the start of the season if you're seeing birds prospecting, because if we become aware nice and early, we can keep an eye on that site, because we're out, you know, all the time.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, we're hoping it won't be as bad this year, like you say. If more people are around earlier, they maybe won't nest in. Yeah.
What we are seeing is that there's a contrast between the northern half of the coast and the southern half of the coast. In that at the moment, the northern half of the coast is very, very, very quiet, and the southern half is, you know, pretty much normal. You know, because obviously there's close conurbations to the southern part of the coast, so people are just making those short local journeys, and they're doing their normal dog walking at the coast, whereas northern half, I think we're going to have a similar situation where suddenly we get lots of people starting. But I think it seems though it's going to be around about mid-April that the stay-at-home instruction is dropped. So it could be a difficult time again if birds have started nesting. So yeah, if you let us know early on, I think that's the best thing.
I will do, definitely. Thank you.
Is there any other questions or?
Go on, Rob.
Just unmute myself. Hello, Richard. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm just wondering, are you working with the local parish councils? I read in the local paper that there has been objection to putting up the, if you like, the ropes around the Long Nanny site for the terns.
Yeah.
I think originally there was also sort of a restriction zone on the north side of the Long Nanny, but local residents from the campsites and various other places in Beadnell are saying, you know, do we have to have that in? So, I mean, if you're getting that level of kickback, it's a bit worrying that it's not just an individual, it's a whole group of people not really understanding what's going on.
Yeah, I'm not as closely involved in that discussion as some. I am aware of what's happening, obviously, and it does seem like a very difficult situation. I would like to, thinking aspirationally, I would like to think that people are able to see that the birds are their birds, you know, so it's not the National Trust's little tern colony, it's Beadnell's tern colony, and actually it's something unique that Beadnell's got that nowhere else on the coast's got. And I think where we can get involved is really reaching people on a face-to-face basis, on an individual basis, to really change around those mindsets that, you know, these are actually our birds, and you know, we need to take responsibility for them. As to how that will play out, the National Trust, I do think, have a very good point about the disturbance on that northern end. I think, unfortunately, there's a little bit of misunderstanding between some of the parties, and I don't think there's as many local residents are against the measures as it seems. I think, you know, there's maybe, you know, one or two within the parish council who are maybe objecting more than others. But I know the A&B partnership and the National Trust are working really closely with the parish to try and make progress on coming to an understanding there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's specific groups that are a bit more vociferous than others, and it isn't a surprise it's coming from the owners of the camping site and the static caravan site, which is a bit annoying, really, particularly when it's not just little terns. I mean, when you walk down there, you've got all sorts of birds. You've got egrets and everything all the way down the length of the Nanny at that point.
It is. It is. It's a really important stretch for wildlife. And, you know, it is only 3 months in a year, and it is only a very small section amongst an entire huge long coastline. So, you know, I think maybe we need to put that in context. You know, even if you live in Beadle, there's still lots of coast to go at. And, you know, I'm aware that from what I can gather, people in Newton and the Newton Parish Council are fairly supportive of it, certainly not objected to any of this either. So, you know, I do think it's something which is important to do, and certainly in terms of the importance of that tern colony, it's hugely important. You know, at the moment, unfortunately, like I was outlining in the talk there, we have got all of our eggs in one basket, so we've got to be really, really careful with that basket at the moment. And as we saw last year, the Arctic terns disappeared. You know, they gave up on the site, and actually the Arctic terns, though they can cause some issues with the little terns, they do provide some good coverage in terms of repelling predators for the little terns. So yeah, it's important we do everything that we can, I think, to help that colony at the moment.
Okay, thanks for that. Obviously glad to help in any way we can. So
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Barbara's got her hand up.
Could I ask a question? Well, it's not a question as such. Unfortunately, I am stuck down in Middlesbrough because of not being able to go into my lodge in Berwick.
Oh dear.
But I am signed up as a National Trust volunteer, both down here and up in Northumberland. Supposed to be taking an active part in Long Nanny, etc., etc. Very concerned. I can't remember where I actually read what Rob's talking about, but I've certainly picked up on it. I feel strongly about it because I have been involved in it, and also locally at Seaton, where we've had problems with little terns, and we used to have them at Redcar at South Gare, and they've disappeared. So one of the things, and I think Richard, it's part of the Shorebirds philosophy, is educating people. And I wonder, it's obviously not your job, but the people involved, surely they could make the campsite owners aware. I'm a member of the Camping and Caravan Club and the Caravan and Motorhome Club, and I know there are sites that are designated sort of nature conservation sites.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And you know, a site like the one Long Nanny, I know which one it is, I've walked through it many times. You know, some information boards, and get the owners of the sites on board.
Yeah.
And sort of, because I'm involved in the RSPB at Salthome locally, and I've done Loch Garten, and one of the things I've really enjoyed is educating the young people.
Yeah.
These caravan sites obviously have families, and young children are our future. And to me, it would be an ideal opportunity for the institutions, the national trusts, the councils as well, the parish councils, to take this opportunity and sort of empower these places with information, etc., etc., and use it as an indirect educational tool.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I do know how it could be done. It could be done quite simply by trying to get people on board and put notice boards and have some information leaflets. Now, I know these things cost money, but surely the government would have some money around. And I think particularly the COVID situation, the lockdown situation, has made a lot of people realise how much we rely on nature and free space and things like this. So that would be one way I would consider it being a way to approach it.
I think you're absolutely right. I know the National Trust and the AONB partnership, and we will be involved as well, is you know, really trying to break down those barriers and reach out to local residents and you know, the likes of the caravan site, and take them down to the Long Nanny, you know, show them the birds, show them the colony, describe the importance of it, and just try and get away from the fact that it's the National Trust birds and Beadnell is separate. You know, really trying to make it so that it's Beadnell's birds, I think, is so important. But yeah, getting involved in education as well, I think I totally agree. I mean, it's certainly an emerging sort of discussion at the moment, Barbara, with the situation at Beadnell. It's, as I say, it's not something which we've been directly involved in because it's the National Trust site, but it's became something which the AONB partnership are really involved in, and they're asking us to get involved as well. So we will get involved in it. And certainly in terms of that education engagement, talking to people about the birds, you know, we're going to be there doing that, no doubt about it. Yeah.
I can speak a little bit from experience because where we have our lodge, we're up on the cliff at Spittal.
Right.
And it's only a small site, Elm Bank, but it's one of these Bellamy award sites.
Yeah.
They are trying to put in a wildflower meadow down at the bottom. She walked down Cow Bank, and also we've put some bat boxes up. I had some bat boxes that I've got left from building bat boxes with North York Moors National Park. We've put those up, and we've also put sparrow boxes up because when we finally could get back up there in July of last year, it was like a bonanza because we'd got birds everywhere, sparrowhawk landing on your patio and things like this. So we took the opportunity, and this winter they've actually put a load of sparrow boxes up on the side of the reception area. Yeah. And that is next to the playground, so that the idea is that the kids, and there aren't many children in the place at all, it's nearly all grey-haired folk like me, but what few children actually go, you know, they can see that there are birds coming in out of house and things like that. So it's possible. Yeah, I think just, you know, making nature a feature of those caravan sites and being a sort of a positive asset rather than, you know, an impediment to fun, which maybe it's sort of being perceived as at the moment. I think is an important sort of discussion to be had, and you know, getting involved with the kids is certainly a good way to do that as well. Yeah. Are there any other?
Mandy's got her hand up.
I'm just following on from what Barbara was saying. I had the idea that permanent signage maybe at Howie could be a good solution, and I spoke to Ian Robson about it, and his take on it was that only a very small proportion of visitors actually read permanent signage, and only a very small proportion of those that read it actually remember any of what they've read 5 minutes down the road. but I think it would be a great idea, because I think you need to get the realisation across that the coast is a habitat and not just a recreation area. And I think a lot of people just see it as a playground rather than a place where creatures have to actually live and breed and survive. So I don't know what your take on that is. Do you come across people that are just not interested at all?
You do, absolutely, you do. Yeah, there are certainly a section of the public who, you know, are there to enjoy what they get out of the coast, and you know, that could be something as basic as, you know, the feeling of open space and, you know, freedom, which is present at the coast, and not necessarily seeing or engaging the wildlife. But that's the challenge that we're involved in, and just pointing out one or two birds and getting involved in the discussion is honestly so valuable, and there's so many discussions to be had with people who are using the coast in different ways. In terms of signage, I do, you know, I understand what Ian says. I think it's a good point. Permanent signage, quite often it just becomes sort of another bit of furniture in the coast, and it can be ignored, particularly by people who are using the coast all the time, which are actually the people that we need to reach the most. My feeling is that sort of small amounts of seasonal signage is quite good, because it's something which wasn't there yesterday, and it's, you know, you might see something which, you know, you're not taking it for granted because it's just appeared, and you might, you know, have a look at it. There will be a section of people, you know, who are visiting the coast and they've got time and they want to try and tease out every little last bit of information, and they'll read the information boards from start to finish. But I think those people are in the minority. There'll be one or two little bits of permanent signage that we might get involved in, but I think a lot of it will be seasonal signage. But also we've found it, I don't know if you've seen any of our A-frame boards. So when we're active in an area, we drop our A-frame boards down in that area that we're working on. And those boards have got the information about the dog ranges, and it's also got information about the guidance. And it's more visual rather than stuff to read, but it just gives an idea of that, you know, this is a place of wildlife, and try and sort of respect the wildlife that's there and give it space. I think they're quite successful in that, you know, again, they weren't there yesterday, so why suddenly something appeared and I'm going to have a quick look at it. And we have, you know, seen people stop and have a read and take photos of it and actually post them on social media later on. So yeah, I think there's a mixed picture, but I think overall fixed permanent signage for the amount that it costs, I'm not sure if it's worth it in the long term.
Richard, I was just wondering how many fines you've issued for dogs. Have you managed to keep it low?
Yeah, we deliberately set out with an aim in the first year of not doing any at all. We think it's important that we make friends at the coast, and you know, we get people to understand and respect the wildlife positively before we start issuing fines. We'll be in a situation where we would consider issuing fines during this breeding bird season coming up. If we're getting repeated problems in repeated areas. We are aware of certain sites which do have repeated problems, and we can get involved in those. And if there are difficult discussions to have, we'll have those discussions. And if they don't bear fruit, then you know, we'll we'll potentially look to issue fines, but only when they're really significant issues. So none so far is the answer.
Yeah, so no, I just remember when all this came out, it was the one thing that everyone picked up on. Oh, everyone's going to get fined. So it's good to know you haven't actually actively done that. Yeah.
I think it's funny actually. I had that slide in, and I did wonder a bit about keeping that slide in, because I don't want people to think that Space for Shorebirds is about throwing fines around, and I don't think the small number of rangers at the coast is going to be able to find our way out of this problem. You know, certainly police at the moment have got powers of making fines for breaching lockdown rules, and it's not really stopping those problems. So mostly it's about education and engagement. Yeah.
I think as well with fines, they can be very negative. You can impose fines. Speaking from experience as an ex-magistrate, you can impose fines, but then try and collect them, and it can actually cost more money to collect fines than, you know, so it can be very negative.
Yeah, I'm really pleased we've got those powers, I must admit. Prior to being one of the county ecologists, I was involved in mineral sites and within the planning department, and we had enforcement powers within the planning setup. And enforcement is really overrated, mostly by people who've never been involved in enforcement. That it's going to be a magic bullet, and it's just not at all. So yeah, I'm pleased we've got those powers, but it's sort of the main part of it is education and engagement.
Joyce and Conrad have asked a question in the chat.
All right.
They've asked, has there been consideration to link in the Space for Shorebirds dog ranges with the local authorities' Green Dog Walker scheme, which I think they're a part of?
Yeah, I looked at that. Not at this stage is the honest answer, because that is much more of a county-wide initiative. There are some things on the Green Dog Walker scheme which very closely align with what we're doing, but there's other aspects. I don't want to people to get the idea that Space for Shorebirds ranges are sort of dog poo ranges as well. That's maybe not what we're about. But I think the Green Dog Walking scheme is a really good scheme. My wife's a professional dog walker, and she as a business has signed up to that scheme, and I think it's excellent. So we give our backing to that scheme, but it is something which is different to dog ranges. Yeah, there's a sort of distinct message between the two, I think.
I think they disappeared off the chat right as you started to talk. I'll drop them an email and let them know that.
Yeah.
Is that everything? Anybody else?
It's been really nice to meet you all, by the way. It's really nice to have a chat, and yeah, and if you see us at the coast, give us a shout as well, because sometimes it can be pretty lonely sort of cold work. So do give us a shout and a hello. Be nice.
And as soon as you if you ever want any of our volunteers to give you a hand, just drop us an email. We'll have plenty of people keen to help you.
Yeah, I'd love to get involved, definitely.
There you go. There's one.
Marvellous. Thank you very much, Mandy. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean,
sorry.
Mandy, give us a message on the on any of our channels there, and we'll get back to you regarding your oyster catches as well, as to see what we can do.
Richard, as well, when I can get back
Brilliant.
up.
Thank you so much.
Sorry. When I can get back up to Berwick, which fingers crossed, after April the 12th, I will not be going south after that. I'm going to chain myself up there or find alternative accommodation. But if you do need anything, particularly Cockleburn, I'm always down on the beach, walking and doing things when I can be there.
Yeah, that would be great. Actually, Berwick is an area where we've done lots of sort of looking at, but in terms of areas where we're sort of engaging, I'm never sure in terms of Berwick where's a good spot to be involved in. I think the North Beach of Berwick seems to be really heavily used by some dog walkers, and also seems to be really quite important for turnstones in particular.
Yeah.
You get a big area of rock gathering there, and you get loads of birds over there. But yeah, so Berwick's going to be a site that we get involved in a bit more. So yeah, I'll certainly give you a shout, Barbara.
But please do. Don't know whether you've heard the bit of the chat before, but I'm also sort of very heavily involved in the U3A geology group, and of course North Beach and beyond is where there's a lot of geological sites as well.
Yes.
Also south of Cockleburn, there's a place just by the lime kiln there.
Mm-hmm.
When the tide's out, well, when the tide's low, it's a great place to just sit and watch sanderling and ring plover and things like that. And albeit Cockleburn is a beach that is used a lot by dog walkers, they all seem to be quite responsible dog walkers to a degree. And you've got the flowers in the dunes as well. So
yeah,
that, as I say, south end of Cockleburn Beach is particularly good for sanderling and ring plover.
Yeah.
So
Sanderling, I mean, Cockleburn we did actually originally have down as one of our focus areas, but in comparison to some of the other sites, we didn't feel as though it was getting used as regularly by as broad a range of shorebirds. But it is a site that we're getting out to maybe once or twice a month just to keep an eye on as to what's going on. But like you say as well, the dune grasslands there are fabulous. So you know it's a really important one. And obviously with piri suddenly appearing there over the last few years, I think we've got to do everything we can to, get involved there and get shot of the dreaded piri.
Well, sorry, just one very willing volunteer when I can get back up there. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to say regarding Cockleburn. Hi, Barbara. It's Kate. I regularly walk at Cockleburn, and actually, in Emma's recent initiative regarding the ring plover monitoring, that's the area that I've been designated. So once you're back, I'd love to be able to get together with you, and can certainly help out, as it were.
Right. Okay, brilliant.
The other thing is, I'm really sorry, I had to disappear to go and sort out an oil delivery briefly, and I hope I haven't missed this bit. But Richard, thank you very much for an interesting talk. Did you mention any collaboration with the Lindisfarne NNR people regarding the areas around Goswick and where that's fenced off for ringed plover nesting, etc.? Because I've been involved with them for the last couple of years, and I presume Space for Shorebirds are working in conjunction with them. Is that right?
Yes, we're a little bit unsure as I'm not sure which bit you missed of the talk, but we are delivering a breeding bird protection program this year. I listened to all the talk. It was just the chat afterwards, and I wondered if anybody else mentioned the NNR guys. Yeah. So because this is our first year, I am a little bit unsure as to how exactly it's going to go in terms of how much interest from birds are going to be involved in our fenced areas. If we get lots of disturbance in those areas. So there's a little bit of an unknown there, and I wish we'd been able to do this in a smaller scale last year, just so we can sort of build up our knowledge But if we find that our sites are not being used, then we'll be able to transfer our resources to the National Trust and the NNR to support what they're doing on their sites. And so we'll be employing a degree of flexibility, and we'll be, you know, I've got a meeting the start of next month with the site manager up at Lindisfarne to try and figure out what they're doing and how we can work with them and support what they're doing, but you know, at the same time deliver what we are attempting to do as well by getting more nesting tern sites and more ring plover sites.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you.